My name is Avery Goodwin. I'm 32 years old, and the last thing my brother ever said to me was, "You don't have the right to step foot in this house anymore." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The words landed clean and sharp, like they'd been rehearsed. I stood on the stone porch of my parents' estate in Westchester, the November wind cutting straight through my coat, a homemade apple pie balanced in my arms, like an offering that suddenly felt ridiculous. Warm cinnamon and butter drifted from the open doorway behind him. Inside, laughter floated out. Glasses clinked. Someone turned up the music. Thanksgiving had already started, just without me. Behind Logan, I could see my mother in the foyer, adjusting flowers that were already perfect. My father stood near the fireplace, smiling wide as he shook hands with a cousin. They heard every word. They saw me standing there. Neither of them said my name. My mother didn't rush forward. She didn't tell Logan to move aside. She didn't even look surprised. She just gave the smallest nod, the kind you give when a decision has already been made and you don't want to discuss it again. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't drop the pie. I just stepped back. Logan closed the door gently, almost politely, and locked it. The sound echoed longer than it should have. They thought that was the end of it. They thought I'd disappear like I always did. They had no idea that within weeks, everything they'd spent decades building was going to collapse. And this time, I wasn't going to stop it. I grew up in a house where love was transactional. In the Goodwin family, dinner wasn't about your day or your feelings. It was about performance, results, leverage. The long walnut table in our Park Slope brownstone functioned more like a boardroom than a dining room. Deals were sketched on napkins, expansion plans discussed between bites of roast chicken. Silence meant disapproval. Praise meant you'd earned your seat for another night. My father, Stanley Goodwin, built the Goodwin Patisserie Group from a single bakery in Carroll Gardens into a supplier every luxury hotel and upscale coffee chain wanted on speed dial. My mother, Rita, handled branding, magazine spreads, social media presence, celebrity endorsements. Image was her religion. And then there was my brother, Logan Goodwin, 3 years older, taller, louder. Confident in the way men are when the world has always met them halfway. He looked like my father, talked like my father, thought like my father. By 25, he was already running half the wholesale division. People used words like natural leader and born successor when they talked about him. I was the anomaly. While Logan spent summers learning negotiation tactics in Paris, I was buried in library books about labor law and workers' rights. When I told my parents I'd been accepted into Columbia Law on a full scholarship, my mother smiled for the photo and then asked if I'd considered marketing instead. "Law is fine," my father said, already distracted by his phone. "But it doesn't put the Goodwin name on billboards." That was the first time I understood that love in our family came with conditions. Logan added to the empire. I questioned it. He closed 7-figure contracts before most people finished paying off student loans. I chose to represent people who worked 12-hour shifts piping frosting for minimum wage. That made me the disappointment. I still remember the Christmas I was 26 and won my first major case. It was a wage theft lawsuit against a restaurant chain that had systematically denied overtime. The settlement brought nearly $300,000 in back pay to workers who had been barely surviving. The judge called it one of the clearest violations he'd seen in years. I flew home to Manhattan buzzing with adrenaline, thinking, just once, they'd be proud. The table was set with gold-rimmed china. The chandelier glittered like it was proud of itself. My mother talked excitedly about a new flagship location opening in Soho. Exposed brick, marble counters, Instagrammable corners. Logan leaned back, swirling a glass of wine that probably cost more than my grocery budget for the week. I waited for a pause and said, "I have something to share too." The room went quiet. I told them about the case, about the workers, about the back pay. My mother smiled tightly. "That's nice, Avery. At least someone's getting paid." Logan laughed. 300 grand split how many ways? You could have made that in a month if you worked with us. My father didn't even look up. Let's not ruin dinner with shop talk that isn't ours. That was the moment it became clear. No matter how many lives I helped, it would never count in their world. Logan got applause for opening a new location. I got silence for keeping people housed. As the years passed, the distance grew. Logan moved into a Williamsburg loft paid for by the company. I stayed in a modest East Village one-bedroom I paid for myself. He flew first class to Los Angeles. I took the subway to court hearings in the Bronx. They only called when they needed something. A contract reviewed, a legal threat neutralized, a quiet opinion before things escalated. I was the family's free legal insurance. And every holiday, every carefully worded invitation carried the same silent hope. Maybe this time will be different. It never was. The call came in early March. My father didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He went straight to the problem. The head of HR had quit without notice. There was an upcoming audit. They needed someone trustworthy to organize employee contracts and records until a replacement was hired. He said it would only be a few weeks. Consultant rates, evenings and weekends. I should have said no. But he said trustworthy. And for one stupid second, it felt like he finally saw me. So I agreed. Walking into the Goodwin Patisserie headquarters in Dumbo felt like stepping into a parallel universe built on sugar and denial. Exposed brick, polished concrete floors, the permanent smell of butter and yeast. Upstairs offices dimly lit, cleaning crews humming quietly in the background. They gave me a small office in the back, far from the showroom where clients sampled $20 croissants. At first, it was just chaos. Contracts scattered everywhere, payroll folders mismatched, digital files a mess. Tedious work, familiar work, the kind I was good at. Then, the numbers stopped adding up. Timesheets showed 55, sometimes 60 hours during peak season. Payroll reports showed 40. Overtime simply disappeared. That wasn't a glitch. That was a decision. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Pandemic relief funds rerouted to renovations, tip pools skimmed, records altered. This wasn't survival. This was theft. And I knew, deep in my bones, that once I truly saw it, I could never unsee it. By the end of the second week, I was sleeping less, eating less, carrying a quiet weight in my chest I recognized all too well. Because this wasn't just another case. This was my family. And I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't walk back from. I still didn't know what I was going to do with what I'd found, but I knew one thing for certain. If I stayed silent, I'd be just like them. By the end of my second week inside the company, I stopped telling myself this was temporary. I started telling myself the truth. Every morning, I rode the subway into Brooklyn with a knot in my stomach, the kind that doesn't come from nerves, but from knowing you're walking into something morally wrong and choosing not to look away. I'd sit at my desk long before anyone else arrived, coffee going cold beside me, staring at spreadsheets that refused to stay quiet. Numbers don't lie. People do. I cross-checked time cards against payroll records again and again. Holiday weeks, peak seasons. The pattern was always the same. 55 hours worked, 40 hours paid. The overtime fields were manually capped, edited by someone with management-level access. That meant intent. Someone had made a choice, over and over, to take money from people who couldn't afford to lose a single shift. I printed the records and laid them side by side. Physical paper made it real in a way screens didn't. It also made it harder to rationalize away. I told myself to stop. I didn't. Instead, I opened a folder labeled Employee Relief Fund. During the pandemic, the company had received significant state and federal grants. Money meant specifically to keep employees paid when stores shut down. The official reports claimed every dollar went to salaries and benefits. But when I followed the internal transfers, large amounts had been rerouted. Equipment upgrades, store renovations, marketing expenses. One transfer, $58,000, lined up perfectly with the opening of the Manhattan flagship location my mother had bragged about for months. Imported Italian marble, custom display cases, a grand opening party with champagne flutes and influencers. Money meant to keep people fed had paid for aesthetics. I felt sick. A few days later, I ran into Gabriela Diaz in the employee break room. She'd been with the company 12 years, started as a cashier, worked her way up to lead pastry decorator. Everyone knew her. She trained half the staff in the building. If you wanted something done right, you asked Gabriela. She poured herself coffee, noticed the circles under my eyes, and asked if I was okay. I hesitated. Then I asked quietly if she'd ever been shorted on tips. Her face changed instantly. She told me the company pooled tips and took an administrative fee before distribution. Sometimes 20%, sometimes 30%. No explanation. When she complained years earlier, Logan told her she was lucky to have a job at all. She had 3 kids, a husband who drove rideshare. Every missing dollar mattered. She showed me old pay stubs on her phone, proof. In that moment, the spreadsheets stopped being abstract. They had names, faces, families. I went back to my desk and sat there long after sunset, the office dark around me, my reflection staring back from the screen. This wasn't negligence. It was systematic. The realization hit slowly, then all at once. The previous HR director hadn't quit. He'd walked away. No one leaves a well-paid executive role weeks before an audit unless they're being asked to sign off on something illegal. I still had full access. I still had time. So I walked into my father's corner office. The view overlooked the East River, Manhattan lights just starting to flicker on. He was on a call, laughing loudly, feet on his desk. When he saw me, he waved me in and ended the conversation without hesitation. I didn't sit. I placed a thin folder on his desk. Inside were printouts, altered timesheets, payroll edits, tip deductions, relief fund transfers. I'd highlighted the key sections in calm yellow marker. He flipped the folder open, glanced at the first page, and smiled. "What's this, Avery? Violations?" "Yes," I said. "Serious ones." I explained it all. Calmly, clearly. State and federal labor law. Overtime theft. Misuse of grant funds. He closed the folder and slid it back toward me. "You're seeing things that aren't there," he said. "These are standard industry practices. Everyone does it." Everyone doesn't steal from people who can't afford to miss a paycheck. His smile disappeared. He stood, walked around the desk until he was close enough that I could smell espresso on his breath. "Let me remind you why you're here," he said quietly. "I asked you to organize files, not play auditor. You work for the family right now, and the family protects its own." "I'm trying to protect all of you," I said. "Fix this before someone outside notices." He leaned in. "You'll put everything back the way it was. You'll sign off that the records are clean, and we'll hire a replacement next month. That's what being part of this company means." "I'm not signing anything that isn't true." His voice dropped. "Then you're choosing to hurt your own blood." He pressed the intercom. "Security, Miss Goodwin is leaving for the day. Please collect her badge." Conversation over. I walked out, but not before returning to my small office. My hands were steady as I logged into the cloud drive I used for personal cases. I copied everything: original records, edits, emails, timestamps, metadata. 15 minutes. That was all it took. When I handed in my badge, the guard nodded politely. He had no idea I was leaving with the one thing that could destroy the entire company. I still told myself my father might cool down, that he'd quietly fix it. I was wrong. Thanksgiving morning, I drove to the family estate anyway. I wore the navy dress I saved for court appearances, the pearl earrings my mother gave me at graduation. I made the apple pie from scratch using her recipe, like muscle memory could bridge a gap years in the making. Logan answered the door. "You don't have the right to step foot in this house anymore." My parents stood behind him, silent. That was the moment something inside me finally went still. Whatever hope I had left burned out in that doorway, and in its place, something colder settled in. If I was no longer family, then I no longer had to protect them. I didn't cry on the drive back to Manhattan. That surprised me. The highway was quiet, the radio off, the hum of the tires steady and almost hypnotic. The apple pie sat untouched on the passenger seat, the smell of cinnamon filling the car in a way that felt cruel now. I kept waiting for the tears to come, for the shaking hands, the sobs, the collapse. None of it happened. Instead, something else took its place. Clarity. Not the dramatic kind, not anger, just a clean, sharp understanding of where I stood. I wasn't family to them. I was a liability, and liabilities get cut loose. By the time I pulled into my building's garage, the sky had gone fully dark. I carried the pie upstairs, set it gently on the counter, and stared at it like it belonged to someone else's life. That was the moment I stopped hoping. And when hope dies, fear usually follows. Mine didn't. I called Knox. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. I didn't ease into it. I told him exactly what Logan had said, what my parents had done, what I had found at the company. There was a long pause. Then he said, "You're done protecting them." "Yes. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Knox showed up in sweatpants and an old hoodie, hair still messy, eyes already sharp. We didn't hug. We didn't talk about feelings. We opened my laptop and pulled up the cloud drive. Page after page, file after file. He whistled softly. "This is airtight." "I know." We worked through the night, organizing, labeling, building timelines, identifying violations. Every time I felt a flicker of doubt, Knox anchored me back to facts. "This isn't revenge," he said at one point. "This is accountability." That distinction mattered more than I expected. The next morning, I reached out to Gabriella. I didn't call her at work. I messaged her through a private Instagram account she used for family photos, something I knew management didn't monitor. I kept it simple. "I have everything. If you and the others are ready, we can make this official." She replied in under 5 minutes, then a phone number, then a group chat invite. By the end of the day, there were 23 people in that chat. Bakers, cashiers, drivers, cleaners. Stories poured in, screenshots of pay stubs, photos of schedules, voice memos of managers threatening termination if anyone complained about missing tips. Some had been with the company over a decade. Others were college students, barely making rent. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a bad manager. This was a business model. Knox and I turned my living room into a war room. Whiteboards, stacks of paper, coffee cups everywhere. We mapped violations under New York labor law, calculated damages, identified responsible parties. We filed the class action complaint first, then the whistleblower report. We didn't go to the press. We didn't need to. The Department of Labor moves quickly when the evidence is clean and the workers are unified. Interview requests came within days. Former employees who had been afraid before now had lawyers and each other. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the family's secrets alone. I waited for guilt to show up. It didn't. Every time doubt crept in, I saw Logan's face in that doorway. My mother turning back to her flowers. My father pressing the intercom without hesitation. This wasn't me betraying them. This was me finally telling the truth. Knox watched me reread the final submission late one night. "You sure you want your name on this?" he asked. "Once it's filed, there's no undoing it." I thought about every holiday I'd spent trying to earn a seat at a table that never wanted me. I've never been more sure of anything. We hit send just after midnight. The confirmation email landed with a soft ping that sounded louder than any explosion. 3 weeks later, my phone started buzzing nonstop with news alerts. The first headline was simple and brutal. Brooklyn bakery empire faces massive labor violation claims. And that was only the beginning. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started quietly, the way real consequences usually do, behind closed doors, in emails marked urgent, in phone calls that didn't get returned. I was standing in the office break room one morning, waiting for coffee to finish brewing, when my phone started vibrating nonstop on the counter. News alerts, text messages, missed calls. The first headline made my stomach drop, even though I'd been expecting it. Brooklyn bakery empire faces massive labor violation claims. By the time I reached my desk, the story was everywhere. Local news, industry blogs, social media threads dissecting every detail. Former employees interviewed outside shuttered storefronts, holding pay stubs up to cameras with shaking hands. Major hotel chains released statements within hours, reviewing supplier relationships. Translation: contracts on hold. 2 national coffee brands followed within 48 hours. The wholesale division lost more than half its volume in a week. The flagship Manhattan store, my mother's pride and joy, lasted 10 days before the landlord changed the locks for unpaid rent. The windows were papered over. The marble counters inside sat unused, spotless and useless. 3 Brooklyn locations followed soon after, each with a handwritten sign taped to the door, closed until further notice. The Department of Labor moved fast. Fines totaling $28 million, full back pay ordered for every affected worker, retroactive 6 years, mandatory compliance monitoring, public disclosure. My father and Logan appeared on the evening news, standing in front of the original Carroll Garden shop, reading from a prepared statement about isolated bookkeeping errors and a renewed commitment to our team. Behind them, just out of frame, a former baker held a sign. "Where's my $14,000? The clip went viral. Suppliers froze accounts, banks called in loans, credit evaporated overnight. The empire that once bragged about lines out the door on Saturday mornings was bleeding out in public. I watched it all from a distance, from my office in Midtown, from my apartment couch with the TV muted while the same footage looped. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel tight. Gabriella called me one afternoon, her voice shaking with something that sounded like relief. "They're saying we're actually going to get everything we're owed," she said. "My youngest can start college without loans." Later that week, I ran into her outside a closed Dumbo location. She hugged me hard, smelling like vanilla and rain. Around us, the city moved on. Taxis honked, people hurried past. No one spared a second glance at the dark storefront that used to represent power. That's when it hit me. Empires don't matter nearly as much as the people they crush on the way up. The knock on my apartment door came on a cold January morning, hard, desperate. I already knew who it was. My parents stood in the hallway with Logan, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. My father's coat was unbuttoned despite the cold. My mother clutched a tissue like it was the only solid thing left in her world. They pushed inside without waiting for an invitation. My father spoke first, voice hoarse. He said they were sorry, that things had spiraled, that if I just clarified a few things with investigators, the fines could be reduced. My mother reached for my hand. "The house is in foreclosure," she whispered. "We don't know where we'll go." Logan finally looked up, anger and panic tangled in his face. "You're killing your own family," he said. "Fix this." I pulled my hand away. "No," I said quietly. "You did this. I just told the truth." Silence filled the room. When they didn't move, I opened the door and waited. They left without saying goodbye. By spring, the company filed for bankruptcy. The Westchester estate sold at auction. My parents moved into a small rental in Yonkers, the kind they used to joke about when driving past. Logan took a mid-level management job out of state. None of them contacted me again. And I didn't reach out. Instead, Knotts and I opened our own labor law firm in a converted Tribeca loft. We focused on wage theft, misclassification, retaliation cases. The work came fast. Referrals from former Goodwin employees, word of mouth, people who had never been listened to before. Gabriella became our office manager. She checked every paycheck down to the penny. Some nights, after long days, I'd come home to my quiet apartment and feel something unfamiliar. Peace. I used to believe family was something you endured. Now I know it's something you choose. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to exploit you. Love isn't proven by silence. And loyalty that demands self-erasure isn't loyalty, it's control. Walking away wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of one where I finally mattered. If you've ever been the one holding everything together while being told you weren't enough, this is your reminder. You don't owe anyone your silence. And choosing yourself is not betrayal, it's survival.